Hello, everyone. It's Wednesday. It's our time with Ricky Williams and a special guest. Today, we are delighted to have Lesley Francis, who I've known for a long time, kind of peripherally, and we've been getting to know each other better lately. But Lesley, why don't we have you introduce yourself? Who are you? What's your sun, moon, and rising? Where are you located?
Okay, well, let's start with the astrology part because that's easy. Um, Sun, Moon, and three other planets in Aquarius,
Wow.
Leo rising.
Wow.
I started studying astrology 51 years ago,
That's all?
and in my passion, I've been a journalist. I've had my own business as an astrologer and an intuitive. And I'm on the verge of, with Andrea's help, of launching a podcast at some point in the future. After all, I am an Aquarian, so sometime in the future.
Yeah.
Yeah, I don't know what else to say about myself except I have 7 planets in air and I like to talk.
Oh, perfect. I have a question. So, the planets in Aquarius, which ones are in the sixth house and which ones are in the seventh house?
So I have Mercury and Venus solidly in the 6th house, Moon's in the 6th conjunct the descendant just off by minutes, Jupiter and the Sun in the 7th.
Ah, perfect. Okay. Thank you.
Wow. Okay, cool. So what generation are you in, Lesley? Like, what's your generation called?
Well, I was born in 1950, so I suppose that makes me a baby boomer.
Okay.
I don't know. As an
Okay.
Aquarian, I don't like labels, but
All right. Another question. What what aspects does the Pluto and Leo make to all any or the tightest aspects it makes to the ascendant or the planets in Aquarius?
are you ready?
Yes. Yeah. Mhm.
I have Moon, Jupiter opposed Pluto right on my ascendant. Pluto's right on my ascendant in the 1st house
Ah, there we
within a
go.
minute.
There we go.
A degree, I mean, not a minute, a
Yeah.
degree.
Yeah. There we go. Pluto on the first. Perfect.
Wow, you're
Wow.
really,
That's powerful. That is really powerful.
Leslie's one of the most powerful astrologers I've ever met. Like I always saw her at Norwalk and she's just kind of on the peripheral, but there's something about her and it's like she's been corralling communities of astrologers for years and years. You were the president of the Edmonton group? Is that true?
Yeah, I was one of the founding members and we're a couple of years shy of our 50th anniversary of the Edmonton Astrological Society.
Wow.
And so I could wish I could say I'd been an active member for the entire number of those 47 years, but no. I've been president, I've been on the board, I've been, yeah, a lot.
Oh, yeah.
And I love to support other astrologers and mentor other astrologers because after all, what's better than in my world than talking about the things that you feel passionate about?
Exactly. Yeah. Especially with Mercury, Venus in the sixth, right? Someone who loves to mentor.
Wow, I've never seen Ricky really do a chart. He's doing a chart over there. This is cool. You want to know
Well,
where
would you like my
Saturn?
birth time and place of birth while you're at it, Ricky?
I mean, actually, I was going to, but I was going to ask, but yeah, I'd love to because something that I've been working on a lot is that and I think since the very beginning of astrology, and not so much now, but I think since the very beginning of astrology, is astrologers were curious about planetary strength, about because we know, especially as we get into astrology, right? And at least for me, I had 10 planets. But as soon as I started studying astrology, I had this insight that some of the planets are going to be stronger than others, And we talk about essential dignity, but to me, that's not the same thing as strength. So I found this really cool astrological text, and they have a algorithm to determine someone's strongest planet.
Oh,
Um,
interesting.
and so I started playing with it. I started playing with it and looking at my chart and my wife's chart and my son's chart and my friend's charts, and it's added a whole new rich dimension to the kind of astrology I practice. And so we even added it to the app. we just launched the strongest planet feature so people can see what their strongest planet is. So yeah, so if I could get your birth information, then I could plug you into the algorithm and see what your strongest planet is.
Okay.
Yeah.
Just for anybody who's listening to this, I'm giving it to Ricky. I'm not giving it to you. No, no, here's the interesting thing. I always think it's ironic that some astrologers will not, and it's entirely a personal choice. This is
Yes.
just my thought about that, which is if you think that you know a person by looking at their chart, yeah, in my opinion, you're sadly mistaken. Because there's
Yep.
so much richness and there's so many ways to express those energies that how could you possibly know the person? Because of course, when clients come and I do charts, I'm always open to meeting who's going to walk through that door.
Yeah.
We are on the right show because that's what we look at this show is the intersections between class, race, astrology, gender, and the chart. And so we're actually adding in all these other layers to the astrology. So that's a really good point. Sorry, I'm
Well,
going to interrupt you from giving your chart details.
no, and it's fine. I just wanted to say that from my point of view, you are not your chart and your chart is not you. You enliven it and it informs you
I'd love
or
that.
enlightens you. So,
Yeah.
because,
Brought Lesley on to make us a little wiser, Ricky.
Oh, I love it. I love it.
so my birth data is February 15th,
Mm-hmm.
1950,
Mm-hmm.
4:38 p.m. in Drumheller, that's Drumheller, Canada.
Ah, perfect.
Okay,
I
so
It's actually Alberta, but
yeah.
sometimes the programs leave space for Alberta and sometimes they don't.
Yeah, so I became so obsessed with like astrology and as a tool that I taught myself to code. So I've created my own little astrology app. Um,
Leela.
Now, that's
well,
what I
no,
call
it's called Astro.
inspiration.
Yeah, exactly. It's called I call it Astrologic. It's like a playground for Leela, but the one that I build and work on every day of my life, I call it Astrologic.
Oh, wow.
Oh, well, I'm going to have to install that app so I can play with it.
Oh
Because
yeah,
what's more
I'd
fun
love to.
than playing with a new tool?
Exactly, especially for an Aquarius. Oh, so beautiful.
It's true.
I just don't want to do the coding.
Yeah, I love it.
I'm going to be watching Lesley as Pluto goes through Aquarius. I'll tell you that much. I'll just be like on Lesley. Okay. So, Lesley, your first question today is, how has racism changed in your lifetime? Or race in general, race, anything?
So thank you for framing it that way because we had a previous conversation about this. So I grew up in a society that was predominantly white. And the only kind of racism that I experienced when I was growing up was prejudice towards Aboriginal people.
Yep.
Ironically, there were a number of Japanese kids of Japanese ancestry at my school. But they were always amongst the most popular people, so I didn't see any kind of racism toward them. So for me, in many respects, racism, it's not that I wasn't aware of it, but it just seemed very much removed, especially since my parents were extremely tolerant people and taught me, luckily with all my plants, Aquarius taught me that people needed to be respected as they were, as opposed to they should fit some. In fact, like I come from a long line of cynical people, kind but cynical people. My grandfather used to say that the only reason that people go to church was men went to church to close business deals and women went to church to show off their clothes. So that was also part, not that I didn't go to Sunday school. And actually when Andrea and I were talking, I realized if I have any prejudice at all, it would be towards religion. Not that I go around haranguing people about it or whatever, because, but, and that was partly, I found my cynicism at about 10 years old.
Hmm.
Because I went to Sunday school, it was a new school, new church, whatever. And the teacher decided that Jesus was about answering questions in a workbook. And my earlier experience had been to have a Sunday school teacher that told the stories.
Yeah.
And the stories really resonated with me, but not writing in a workbook. So I went home and I said to my mother, I'm not going to Sunday school anymore. And she said, why? I said, because I don't think that Jesus is about answering questions in a workbook.
Yeah.
So I've always shown a highly independent nature. I'm not so sure that was always appreciated. But back to the business of racism. So when Andrea asked me to be part of this podcast, I kind of, and speak about Pluto and Leo, I kind of felt like I'm not really sure what I have to contribute to the conversation, because I haven't, like in the province that I live in, there's more of a divide politically than there is. Although, I did experience more racism as because I was working at the major daily newspaper, and then our culture in Canada started to shift significantly in the 70s and 80s, and then continued on through the 90s, when we started to get an influx of people from India and Pakistan. And that's when I started to hear people say things that really, actually, to be honest, offended me, because it's like, I don't know how you could decide that you don't like a group of people. That'd be like if I said I don't like astrologers. It's like, and I didn't really understand it. So my experience of it personally has always been to be offended by it, to be honest.
Yeah. So it's, the question was about racism, but what we have found, it's really more about otherism, and because if we make it about racism, then some people are more comfortable, have more experience, less experience. But if we make it about otherism, I think that's something that everyone can relate to, both on the receiving end and on the behavior end.
Well, and if we're talking astrology, we're talking the seventh house, right?
Yeah.
Because that's otherism, and otherism, I love that. It permeates our society in every possible way that you could think of.
Mm-hmm.
Like it's kind of overwhelming and almost painful at times, that you simply can't accept someone because they're not like you.
Well, I think it's at the core, at the core of everything. Is because as you said that, the word that popped into my mind, first house, seventh house, is sex. And sex, in order to creative sex, meaning to produce something, you have to have two opposite things, right? That like each other enough to come together for, a couple minutes. So,
or a few hours, actually.
Yes,
No,
yeah.
I totally flexed
I
right
don't know
there.
about the few hours. I mean, I have 3 children. It took longer to deliver them. Not that it took very long to deliver them, but it's longer than the sex. So
exactly,
there you go.
exactly. But I think it's there, and I think the deepest psychologist or studiers of the human psyche is kind of where they ended up, where most religions ended up. It's about harmonizing opposing forces. And so I think, and that's like a deep spiritual truth. And I think if we're not willing to do that inside of ourselves, and I think this is the beauty of the chart, it allows us to see, right, what needs to be harmonized and to apply our efforts wisely. But if we're not willing, yeah, please go ahead.
Oh, no, I would only say that, see, for me, harmony is like balance. It's difficult to achieve. So I often use the word integration.
Yeah.
Harmony's a liminal state. We go into harmony transits, we come out of harmony transits, but I see where integration can be like you have harmony, you integrate that. Then when you have a challenge, it's like
I guess when I say harmony, I'm thinking of Libra is like as a cardinal sign, and that it is that the nature of the scales, right, is that the scales spend most of their time going back and forth. You know, it's
Like the
like
teeter-totter.
exactly 100%. When I'm talking about the seventh house to someone, I use the teeter-totter every single time, right? Because if we appreciate harmony as an active pursuit of something and we learn to understand what it is and how to do it, right? Right, then that's what creates the integration. I think the work of trying to do it. So if I'm talking to someone about the first and the seventh house, I'll say, imagine being on a teeter totter or a seesaw with someone who is half your weight. You know, right? That's not much fun, right? Or imagine someone who's twice your weight. Again, right? There's not much movement. Right? So, so once we realize, and I think this is like in all like epics, right? The forces of good, the forces of evil, but just this idea of otherness is there's things that are outside of us that we need to be able to open up to and experience in order to have integration or harmony. And that's an active process.
Which most people refuse to engage in.
Yeah.
Well, this
Yeah.
is a good segue into the next question, which is what do you think that the Neptune in Libra generation, which is also the Pluto and Leo generation, but let's start with the Neptune in Libra since we're talking about Libra. What do the Neptune in Libras have to offer this kind of integration act or this balance act of othering because of the Neptune part of it? It seems like it would be a dissolution of otherment.
Well, in a way, speaking as a person who has Neptune in Libra, I mean, I've always suffered to some degree from what I call the Pollyanna complex. Everybody's the nicest person I ever met until they prove otherwise. I think I think there's a fantasy around Neptune and Libra. And I think that there's the potential when we're looking at how it might function in Libra is that they're going to be the people who go, well, everything's fine. I don't know what you're talking about.
Mm.
To the people who are highly disillusioned and so are going to reject any kind of invitation to find that space and that place where they could come together with a group, a person, an idea, a study, whatever. Neptune is and I find Neptune to be fairly prominent for me. So as I said, I always think everybody's the nicest person and I ever met until they prove otherwise. I think there's such a great divide, and a lot of it has to do, and because that Pluto Neptune thing is always sextile for my generation. Again, I think there's this need to believe that everything is fine as long as you believe that it's fine. Because Libra is an air sign, and so what goes on and around in your head may or may not actually translate to your action. So there can be that disconnect. And it could be Pluto comes in and says, now hang on for a second. Get real.
So, Ricky, do you think that Neptune and Libra, if you approach people and you say, like, I trust you, I love you until you prove otherwise, do you think that that's not othering somebody? That would be welcoming them in as one of your own, or what do you think?
That's Neptune. That's Neptune and Libra. Yeah. Well, to me, Neptune is where it's easy for something to capture our imagination. All right. And if something can capture our imagination, we can tap into the higher possibilities of what's there. You know? And I think what's interesting in this case is yes, the whole generation Neptune sextile Pluto, but in this case, Neptune in a very tight trine to the planet Jupiter. Right? So just because there's going to be a variety in the people who have Neptune in Libra, especially considering that the South Node was passing through Libra.
Well, you have now illuminated all the reasons why I think the way.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
I just wanted to say though that I think sometimes Neptune, the fog and everything is designed to bring clarity.
Mm, mm,
So if you're using your Neptune and Libra in the way that it could be used on a deeper, more profound level, there is the recognition that in some way, shape, or form, we are all still the same, even though it looks like we're other.
yes, exactly. But I think we need the Neptune and Libra energy to help us connect to the higher possibilities of the integration, right? Because the thing, if someone is really tapped into a vision and they embody it and they can express it, it allows them to tap and activate other people's imaginations. And I think in Neptune, in its some of its highest expressions, it's really about raising our vibration. So and I think as Neptune is about to enter Aries, is like we hopefully we have enough Libra to be able to balance what's coming. And
Well,
also I think Libra being a cardinal sign, and with the Mars conjunct the South Node and the Mars conjunct Neptune, there's two things. One is about the ability to perceive the vision, but the other is about the passion or the energy, the grit to be able to take action in that direction.
Yeah, it makes me think of, you guys are making me think of all the different aspects coming from a Neptune and Libra, like with Leslie's trine to Jupiter. It's like she's going to be the best of that generation, right? But let's say somebody had Neptune in Libra square Mars, they would not other someone, they would say, "Hey, how's it going?" And then all of a sudden they get cranky about what happened because it's square to Mars. So they're like, "Oh, this, I was too trusting of this other, and so that might even create some like racism in that chart because of the
I,
disillusionment of trust.
I just have to interject because the reason why I laughed is because my middle son has Mars in Sagittarius in the first house conjunct Neptune, and
Weird.
he's a zealot
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
Yeah,
about
100%.
whatever it is he
Yeah.
believes. And I think it's interesting because it's a different expression than the one that I have in my chart. Because I'm always willing to listen to other people. Um, and I think it's sometimes confusing for them, not just to talk about myself, but
Yeah.
because then, I'm a very opinionated person.
Mhm.
And
You
just
know,
because you can listen to somebody doesn't mean you agree with them. And I think that sometimes people get that confused. And with that Neptune and Libra, sometimes I haven't bothered to say to the person, look, I don't agree with you, just because it's
not worth it. Yeah.
and I
So,
and so I yeah, carry on. I was gonna say something and it flew out the
do
window.
you currently think there's enough representation of various cultures in astrology? Do you think there is an equality going on, or what do you think of the current state of astrology?
Well, I'm not really sure how to answer that question because I'm not sure I'm as tapped in as maybe you are than going to conferences. Although I have to say that I don't think it was last year, Nora, but a couple of years ago when there was that huge influx of younger people and they were playing a drinking game with Astro dice. It was like, oh wow, things are changing. I'm not saying I was offended by it at all because I wasn't, but um I do think, if I tap into the energy of where astrology is right now, it honestly, it feels to me like the pendulum swinging back and forth.
Hmm.
And I don't know if there's anything wrong with that. I think that it's like I've said to Andrea many times, I really believe that every astrologer practices astrology through the lens of who they are.
Yep.
And so it's not
Yep.
up to, I do get a little bit um, turned off, and so I don't participate in any of those events where people want to take pot shots at each other. It's just not my. I don't think anything positive comes from it or anything helpful, and it creates more otherness
Yeah. Yeah. There we go. Right back. Yeah.
than is necessary. But on the other hand, astrology has become more vibrant and more universal in a way. More people are studying it, more people are aware of it. And for me, astrology is such a powerful language. I would like to have everybody to have some access to it in some way, shape, or form.
Yeah. 100.
Um,
Wow. That's great. So I think it's coming, right? We're in the age of Aquarius, and my my prophecy is at the end of the age of Aquarius, everyone is going to know astrology, right? And it'll be taught in schools, and it'll be the language. It'll be the language. I think it'll be the Christianity of the way that Christianity was to the age of Pisces. I think an astrological religion will take its place, and
Yeah, don't say the word religion.
yeah. But, well,
Well, no,
I think we can heal. I think we can heal the word religion if we put a little bit of Aquarius on it. Meaning we don't have to ascribe to the old idea and the old definition of religion, that we can come up with a better one. But we don't need to get rid of the word, but we can improve upon it.
okay, I'm open to that.
Oh, perfect.
You can persuade me.
Oh, good.
Whoa.
Well,
Well, as the president of Edmonton, do you feel like you had an equal amount of astrologers come through who were of various cultures, or were most of them Caucasian?
well, up until recently, I would say most of them were Caucasian. Um, we're now starting to see more diversity in our membership.
Yeah, I think it was brought up on the show a few weeks ago that there's some reasons for that. Like Ricky was saying that in certain cultures, like there's a more strong religious influence. Sorry to bring that word up again, but
No,
like
it's fine.
like there's strength in the Black church, for example, and that a lot of times religion is at odds with astrology, and so that's maybe some of that underrepresentation hasn't been because of oppression or racism, but maybe it could have just been cultural blocks or things like that.
It's environment. I mean, but I think when we talk about race, and I'm starting to feel like race is kind of the ghetto. I'd like to really focus on otherness, because that's really what's at the core of it. And I think by just focusing on racism, it allows us to hide or pretend all the other ways we're doing the same thing are not there.
Well, to me, otherness is what it often boils down to is power over superiority, inferiority, the dynamic of not being able to meet a person just as they are without, factoring in a whole bunch of things that may or may not meet your expectation.
Yeah, and I think otherness is the easiest outlet of any internal discord. It's like if we're upset, the easiest person to throw mud at is the person that's furthest away from us. So I just think unconsciously it's a channel. That's why I think it's a channel all for us to get better. Because I was last night I was talking to my wife, and she was complaining about someone on our team, and I was like, and I said, to me, if something is activating you, don't look so much at the other person, right? Look in the mirror and say, why is this bothering me so much?
Exactly.
And then look at your chart.
Well,
you're going to learn something.
As my younger son would say that, if somebody complains, well, really, that's a you problem.
Yes. But with the chart, we have it can help us, because we can realize that whoever this person is, they're stirring something up in me. And then when we look at the chart, we're going to see, right, what they represent in the progression or the aspecting planet. And then we're going to see the part of us that's getting activated. And then, oh, wow, right, we can work with that.
Should we change the name of this show to Astrology and Otherness?
I think, yeah, I'd love to. Because to me, it's a direct in, and it'll heal the issue of racism, right? Because if I don't have any anger, then I have no motivation to be anti-other.
Well, then there's no sexism. There's no.
But on the other side, I think we get
all the other kinds of otherness that we have talked about.
And I get this is like Venus's rulership of Libra is here. Is like the cure to otherness is the ability to appreciate. The ability to appreciate what someone's value, what someone has to offer. Yeah.
Well, you never really truly experience another person if you've already decided who they are and what they stand for and all that other stuff. That's even true in astrology. Like, this is one of the things we have to be so careful about as astrologers is to understand, first of all, in astrology, what triggers us, because I remember this is so long ago. This would have been in the early 80s, I think. I was a lecture that John McCormick gave, and he's not been on the planet for a very long time. Very smart guy, funny as hell. And yet he said quite bluntly, I don't like Aquarius. Um, and actually I wasn't offended by that because he was honest about it, but we, part of the challenge in doing astrology is when we meet a client or when we meet other astrologers, are we open to who they really are? Like, I really appreciate, Ricky, that you asked me right away what my birth data was.
Yeah.
And it wasn't it was out of curiosity and interest. See, that to me is one of the best things about astrology is we are curious and we're interested. So could we always operate from that place as opposed to trying to decide the myriad of things that in a strange sort of way, I think when we're talking about otherness, people are trying to identify themselves much more than trying to identify the other person.
Well, don't you think astrology is an art of connectedness where we say, no matter what our race, class, gender, or what have you, we're interested in this chart layer of each other. And so we're looking for not necessarily sameness, but we might be looking for synastries and connections. And, I feel like it does reduce otherness. Although, what if someone was on our show that was a non-astrologer? Would we other them?
Well, I think,
No,
but so there's a link here, and it feels very much connected to the air signs, and it's cool to talk about because it's a way to see how the air signs are all connected to each other. So I started talking about Libra and the ability to appreciate someone, right? And the air sign that comes before Libra is Gemini, and Gemini for me is the sign of curiosity. And so, in order to be able to appreciate something, in order to get to Libra, you first have to be curious about it. You and so I think these are clues, clues because in I think Venus I connect to value, and I think if we find what we can appreciate about the other person, right, then we can help that value in them appreciate. But so much I think we're not focused on. And it sounds selfish, but I think maybe it is. But this idea of what does this person have to offer me? Because this attunes us into what does this person have that I can appreciate? Because everyone has something, And I think if we orient ourselves, and I think curiosity, right? To me, the curious question I have is, right, what does this person have to offer? And if I look for that, it tends to come out, and I can acknowledge that in them, and I see it has the opportunity to grow even more. And that's why I like looking at my Venus is in Aries. My Venus is in Aries in the 8th house, conjunct Mars.
See, I have Venus in Aquarius, and I just want to know why is the person interesting? That's mostly what I want to know. And I can determine that shortly.
You're making me think, Ricky, like when people are always like, so and so you used me, I was like, they utilized you actually.
Exactly.
It's like, don't be a victim. Come on.
Well, what happens if you're not willing to offer something of value? People will take it, right? That's otherwise they're not going to be in the relationship anymore.
Venus is looking, and especially in Libra, the Libra energy is looking to build a bridge. Like, well, that's a good. I'm here and you're there, and how do we build the bridge? And it doesn't always have to be based on we're exactly the same and we think the same. But so I guess for me, because you haven't got to Aquarius yet, so I'm kind of interested to see how you're going to interpret Aquarius. And part of the strength I found as a journalist was that I really am interested in other people. And this was not something that really fit into journalism when I got into it. You were supposed to want to cover politics or and I didn't want to do anything where I had to listen to people say the same stupid shit every day. I wanted to be a feature writer. I wanted to write about people where they live, what their lives are like, what are the things that really matter to them. And I was told there was no place for that. So I feel like I somehow still managed to work for that newspaper for 21 years, but hey, so I think that we all see connection. That's the truth, you know? We all see connection, and yet we find all kinds of ways to kind of muck that up so that we cannot have an authentic connection with someone.
I've got an
Wow.
agenda. I'm like,
Wow.
my agenda is seeping in. So then that makes me want to segue into the Uranus and Libra generation, which was kind of like the ones that came before or after the Neptune and Libras. And like, how did that? Because then we get to our Pluto and Libra generation, and it's just like, since we keep talking about this otherness dance and the scales and 1-7 and all this stuff, it's like, how did the and Libra generation tweak this otherness thing? Do we know anything about them and what they did about? I'm not going to use the R word. What did they do about otherness?
What years are
Ooh,
these?
What years are Uranus and Libra? Okay, I just got an ephemeris. I had lost mine. Um, this is like 1970 to 76. No, 70,
no, it must be earlier than 19.
75.
Oh, it is 19. Okay.
Oh.
1970, 75.
Okay, I know
Oh,
one of these. I know one of these. I have a really good friend. Interesting.
So, well, I got married with Uranus and Libra.
I know several of
Uh,
these, and they're kind of bop around meeting people. I was just like, hey, shiny Bill. I met Bill at the grocery store, and now I met Sally at the bar. And like, they're kind of like really excited about connecting. And like, I don't know if that makes, them open to others or if I don't know.
I, I, I really think that, well, it kind of reminds me of, and this Buzz Myers talking about the Uranus and Cancer generation, which is my generation. He said, well, those people came in here to show us how to create family in a different way, right? So I think that it holds true that Uranus is always seeking to turn the apple cart over a little bit or a lot, depending, so we can actually figure out how to relate differently. And and really the feminist movement really started as Uranus was exiting Virgo and moving into Libra.
Mm. Yeah, there could be different waves of feminism or dealing with isms, with each of these. Well, no, I can't say
Like otherism.
Yeah,
Ricky
otherisms.
changed
Yeah.
the show on me midstream, so I'm screwed.
Well, and this whole notion that others are intent on change, and on fucking your life over.
Yeah.
Yeah, maybe you're
If
right.
you're
There's some
different than me,
innovation in
then
that generation. Like maybe that your generation came to kind of idealize connections and say like otherness can dissolve. And then the Uranus and Libras kind of had a new way of kind of connecting with people. And then maybe the Pluto and Libras are going to intensely connect. Like Ricky and our Pluto and Libras, and look at us intensely making this show together that's like fighting otherness. Like we're kind of I don't know. I feel like Pluto and Libra is like going at the issue like really head on, you know?
So
well,
sorry, go ahead.
I was going to say the message consistently started with Neptune, which you said dissolves things. So dissolve starts to dissolve our perception of what relationship or connection is. And then Uranus comes along and says, well, okay, so that's nice, but what are we going to do differently? And then Pluto comes along and says, my job is I have the cleanup position. I'm going to come in, and if you're still hanging on to your garbage,
Ricky, we're cleanup crew.
Yeah, I think that's one of the manifestations, one of the roles.
Yeah.
But looking at it from putting on my evolutionary astrology glasses and saying that there's a level of Libra that we're all evolving towards, and that each of the planets moving through set the stage to facilitate that evolution. So, right, it's my teacher Steve, he always says, we were dumber in the past, and this idea that this is evolution. And so there were types of relationships that weren't possible 200 years ago, they just weren't possible, right? And because of the changes that have happened, right? And we can talk about the changes of these planets moving through Libra, right? That there are potentials now available for this integration, this harmonizing, this balancing, and I'd say with Pluto at deeper levels now because of what I think of the image that I keep getting for Uranus moving through Libra is breaking things up.
Mm.
Is
Or
breaking
as
things
Rick
up.
Levine would say, break down or break through.
Yeah, that's what it feels like, breaking things up to allow something else to show up that couldn't have shown up if the old structures were in place.
Yeah.
And yet, don't you find it interesting, though, that now people are trying to bring old structures back?
Well, because I think that's I think that's what happens. And I was reading something about Uranus, and it says Uranus represents things that are really old or really new.
Well, and I do think, before we can get to the transformative phase of Pluto, we really do need to take the garbage out. Because you can't transform yourself if you're not willing to look at the truth of your life experiences and what they meant to you.
Perfect. Yeah. And at least my personal experience is, I think in astrological writing, that 100%, and I understand it's important. Pluto is about taking the garbage out, but it's not taking the garbage out. But we lose sight of the purpose of taking the garbage out. Is there something higher on the other side that we can't access if we have the garbage? So
Yeah,
I feel like if we focus more, and even in Stephen's book on Pluto, he talks up the higher side of Pluto, but he still focuses on the wound. And I think that if we focus on the wound, it's easy to get stuck. If we focus on what is the motivation to deal with this shit, I think that can help us do the transformation without it being so heavy, because we're tapping into the inspiration of what this is all about.
Okay, speaking as a person who has lived her whole life with Pluto on her ascendant, and quite obviously, what my chart says is that if I didn't do the work, it would affect my physical body.
Yes.
And actually, this is so apropos because when it came time for me to end my marriage, I had a feeling if I didn't get out, I would physically leave the planet.
Yeah.
I was going to get out of it one way or the other. And I absolutely agree that, here's a challenge. A lot of people don't even want to take the garbage out, much less get to the part where they understand that there's a gift. I often say to clients, if you were looking for bliss, why did you come here? Because that's not what the third dimension is. I don't mean there are no blissful moments or content or happy moments. What I mean is that expecting if you close your eyes really tight and you open them again, everything will be fine without you having done anything.
Yeah.
And so Pluto is a call, definitely, to get, pardon the pun or the obvious statement, have to get your shit together.
Yeah.
It's an opportunity to get your shit together.
Yeah. Yeah. But it's like the way I look at it, to get your shit together because the universe needs you. Right. And I think there's this Stephen talks about it. It's cool how he talks about it. He said Pluto is the energy that changes the world. It's like when you get to that, and we won't call it bliss in the conventional way, but there is a kind of bliss when you have zero doubt of what you are on this planet to do.
And right? I would agree.
It doesn't make it. It does make it easier because you have the energy. You have access to the motivation and the energy to get on with it. And I don't have Pluto conjunct my ascendant, but I do have Pluto. But I do have Pluto in the first house, and it's.
Wow! So we're talking the same language, basically.
Yes, exactly.
So
and
it's square his moon too.
Well,
and suppose.
Well, I guess we're going to get along well then, Ricky.
Yeah. Yes.
I definitely think you guys have a good comp.
So, well, yeah, I agree with everything that you've said. It's until you're willing to, because to me, Pluto's, you're all in. You're either all in or you're not.
Yeah.
And if you're all in, you can move things away and you can find, like, I've been talking a lot with Andrea about my calling and what I feel called to do and why I do the things that I do. And I absolutely believe that Pluto does call you to get real, to invest yourself 100%, or I don't even like to put a percentage on it.
Yeah, yeah.
Just to, it might take you a lifetime to get there.
Mhm.
Hey, Lesley, we got 10 minutes. I want to grill your brain on something else. Okay, you ready?
Okay.
Okay, so when you're doing a chart reading with your Neptune in Libra and your Pluto in Leo, do you consider the person's gender, religion, culture, race in the reading? Like, how do you weave together those pieces?
Well, I maybe this is, I will consider their culture, but I read to assist the human. And if I feel, okay, so again, I said people practice astrology through the lens of, through their own lens. And for me, I really always feel I'm here to do Moon Pluto work with people. And so I will consider their culture if they bring it up. I don't want to make assumptions about other cultures because I wasn't raised in that culture. What I know is perhaps intellectual. I always, I try my very best, to always lead with my heart. And that's all I can really say, because I don't go, oh, well, if I'm going to talk to this person, I have to take all the,
If you
these
had
things into
Astro
account.
twins, like you had Astro twins, same chart, one was a Caucasian person and one was an Aboriginal person in Canada. I don't know if that's a thing.
Yeah,
Would you approach the reading differently in each case?
no.
What would be different there?
And the reason I wouldn't is because I'd be looking at the chart. If you look at a chart, you can't tell what gender a person is if you don't have a name or anything, and all you have is the birth information. Where was I reading recently? Oh, I think it was in Liz Green's book on Chiron. She said, if you're looking at a chart, you can't tell whether it's a person, event, a dog. You could be an accident that somebody had, you don't know.
Mhm.
So I'm looking at the interaction of the planetary energies that are in their chart. And I would hope that if they're, because for me, a reading is as much a conversation as it is a reading. So I want my clients to participate. As I often say, this is about you, it's not about me.
That's Ricky's style too. He asks a lot of questions.
So I don't really, other than to say what I've said, I don't know how else to answer that question.
Well, again, I think I know I changed it mid, but in the future, this is, I think, the nature of the questions about race and gender, it's tricky. But I think what everyone can relate to is this idea of otherness.
So,
And so what I mean is, like, but the otherness is it's a place of sensitivity for other people. So I think when and this is part of the context gaining or the conversation piece, is it's about identity, right? And we don't know how someone identifies. If I'm talking to someone and they keep bringing up race, then I know that race is a big part of their identity, and it behooves me to consider how that form of identity is affecting the way they have access or to expressing the potentials in their chart. Again, I don't think we think about it, but in the conversation and always seeing the human in the chart, right? I think identity is the way we see the human in the chart. And another way to think about this is, I think gender, race, identity, even, it's an expression of environment. I was talking to my wife about this. I said, someone is going through a Mars activation, a big Mars square, right? A lot of how that shows up in their life is going to do with their environment, right? Did they live with an abusive parent? Okay. Right. It's likely to show up in one way than if they're in a completely different situation. So So I think gender, race, identity, it's a consideration because it's part of the environment through which the chart is expressing. And from an evolutionary perspective, there's evolutionary purpose in the gender, in the race, and the ethnicity, and all of these things because right that's the environment that the chart is expressing through, and it has to find a way to be part of the story.
Lesley, I feel like you were trying to say something.
Well, that question kind of caught me unawares because honestly, I think as astrologers, we all have a tendency at times when we look at a chart, when we're prepping to make some conclusions. And I'm always open to the person sharing their life story with me. Again, much the same as all the work I've ever done is for me, well, you see, I have Sun in the 7th and Jupiter there too. I always want to include others. I find others to be, I don't know, fascinating to me. And so I guess it's part of my thing not to jump to conclusions. It's not that I don't notice that people come from different cultures and different ethnicities. Obviously I do, but I still, until they talk to me about what their environment was, I don't want to make any assumption.
Well, it's interesting because like a good doctor would approach two different clients the same way, depending, no, like if they have asthma, they're having an asthma attack, you'd be like giving them a breathing treatment. Like it doesn't matter their culture or their gender, right? But
That's not necessarily true. So a big part,
because Ptolemy would say you should look at all these things. That makes a good astrologer. Okay, go ahead.
yeah, well, a good doctor, right? They have their reports, right? They have there's, when you have to go to the doctor, you have to fill out all that contextual information, right? And this is something that I've learned to appreciate just in the past couple of years. I don't think you can do really good astrology unless you are getting context about the environment from the person. And I think this, more specifically, I think this is also a solution to the diversity issue around astrology, is that astrologers need to in my opinion, need to start thinking more about how the chart interacts with identity. So it's a greater invitation of curiosity about.
I don't really understand what you mean by that, because for me the chart is the identity.
Well, and Ptolemy would say there's 4 parts of the growing creature. There's genetics, culture, climate, and the chart. And that's what this show looks a lot at.
And I'm saying that's all environment. And I say the chart is like a seed, or it's a potential, but you take the same seed and you put it in different soil, you're going to get something different. You're going to get something different. And I'm saying if you understand the soil and you understand the ingredients that are going in the soil, you can appreciate the specific variation or the environmental situations that this plant needs help in navigating.
Okay. So am I being misunderstood in some way?
No, we're just Pluto and Libras. We're just pushing the equation. We're like really pushing this equation. Like that's the point of the show, is we're trying to get astrologers to integrate all of these parts. And that's, I mean, I don't know.
What I'm saying is I'm agreeing with you. I'm saying like good astrologers do it, but they don't think about it. So we're just trying to help people think about it more, because it's something that good astrologers do, but because we don't think about it, we don't pass it down to the younger people and empower them with that perspective to start thinking about it that way.
Yeah.
Well, it does take some life experience. Like at the beginning of the show, I said I didn't have a lot of one-on-one experience with racism. And quite frankly, the only thing that I might have experienced, that of course part of my family is Protestant Irish, and there was pushback against anybody who was Irish or Catholic of any kind should show up in our family. I've experienced that kind of otherism.
Yeah. So an example would be, right, someone who is experiencing that kind of otherism and they have Jupiter in the seventh house in Aquarius, right? And there's a strong urge to marry someone of a different religion, right? And they have to
Which
push
I
up against,
did.
right? Exactly. That's what I'm saying. Where that's a contextual experience that comes from gender, right? That you wouldn't appreciate in a different family, in a different context.
Well, and it was, just to speak about otherism, it was a challenge for me because my mother was university educated and a professional person. She was a dietitian. And so I did not, I mean, I had people telling me that my mother shouldn't work.
Hmm.
I've experienced other kinds of otherism, just
Yeah.
not that particular one. And
Yeah.
so which I always thought for me as an Aquarian was totally illogical. I said, well, I'm not at home. Why should my mother be there if I'm not there?
Guys, I'm so sad to have to clip this conversation. It's getting so lively. It's our
We'll have to continue at some point.
Yes, I'd
should
love
we have you back, Lesley? Did we offend you too much?
Absolutely, this was fun.
Okay. All right, we'll have you back. I still have a whole page of questions for you. So, well, thank you both so much. I really had a ball.
Yeah, me too.
Okay, so when you turn off the recording, I have a question I want to ask Ricky.
Okay, hold on. Let me stop the recording. Bye, everyone.